Hello guys, welcome back. Today was session 9. We're starting to get into the second half and deeper into the semester. I hope you're enjoying the class and I hope you guys are moving forward on your individual projects. Today we're going to talk about some of the other STIs, sexually transmitted infections that are out there. I wanted to go into just a couple of these to highlight what they are. I'm not going to go into detail because there's so many of them. I just wanted to kind of give you a couple of ideas as to what to think about when you're talking about other STIs and what's out there. But we're going to talk about just a couple of them and move on. If you're interested in any of these particular STIs or some of the ones I didn't talk about, then I hope you are working on your individual project with that one. And I look forward to reading about it. And if you include it in your final papers for the rest of the class to see, it would be also great. So what is an STI and why do I talk about STIs versus STDs? So an STI is a sexually transmitted infection. People who get an STI may not actually show any physical characteristics. They might actually show symptoms, but they could still be infected. So that's why, and they can still transmit the disease to other people. So people that have an infection have the ability to infect other people even if they're not showing any of the diseases. A great example of this is, well, for instance, HIV we talked about before. You may be in the prodrome stage where you're actually dormant, where the virus is not showing and you don't have any symptoms, but yeah, you can still spread HIV. Another example is HPV. Pretty much any of these. Herpes virus can do it. Herpes simplex 1, herpes simplex 2, HSV2 especially. If you're not showing any of the lesions on the vaginal area, you may actually be able to transmit the disease. They only pop up occasionally. So that's why I talk about STIs rather than STDs. The disease state itself is the STD. So some of the ones that I wanted to just focus on real quick is just show some of the things that people are looking at. And I'm just going to focus on these 4: chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, and trichomoniasis. And if you actually look at the incidence and prevalence of these individual diseases, you can see some of them are fairly low prevalence. Chlamydia, only about 5% of the population, 4% in men, 5% in women have it. But it's quite interesting when you actually look at some of the other diseases, such as the trichomona, for instance. Men only have a prevalence of 4%. Women, you have a prevalence of almost 40%. You're in the lines of HIV/AIDS rates and that type of thing. 28, 30% incidence is pretty significant. So, these are not insignificant diseases. They do have, a lot of them have treatments available, and for many cases, such as gonorrhea, it's a lot of people, think of it as just the disease. Oh, well, you get it, you take a shot of penicillin and you're cured. But, drug resistance is also, as I mentioned before with HIV, drug resistance is a major problem with this. What's even more interesting when you actually look at some of the other areas, so if you look at Africa before, you could see that it's fairly low prevalence, relatively low, but now you're starting to getting into the Americas, which has a very low HIV prevalence, but chlamydia has an incidence and prevalence in the 18 range for women and men 9% range. So there's a pretty significant difference between men and women. And what are the social economic reasons, social and economic reasons for that? Is an interesting scientific experiment to see using in the public health world. Again, when you look at the trichomonas, it's quite interesting to see that almost half the population has an incidence of that disease, which is quite significant. 50% of women have the prevalence of that disease. So it's something to be, it's not insignificant. And then when you look at Southeast Asia, the lower percentages for the most part, but again, still, fairly representative. What's interesting is here when you actually look at Europe for chlamydia, chlamydia has a higher rate than in Africa, 4% in Africa, 8% in Europe. So you would think, oh, well, it's a first world country, developed country, we got rid of a lot of these infectious diseases, but why is it so much higher? So even in the developed countries, you have to be aware that these diseases are out there and they're quite prevalent, and there's issues that go along with that as to why this is happening. So thinking about the social problems that are going on, the social construct, the stigma, the taboos, is something to be concerned about when you're talking about these individual STIs. And that's one of the major things that Here's the Mediterranean region. It's fairly low in the Mediterranean region. Quite interesting. What are the reasons for that? Think about those in the social context. Western Pacific, just go into that real quick. Let's just talk about this real quick. The syndromic management. So all these have fairly easy antibiotics that you can take for them for the most part. What you'll typically do is you'll have a patient that comes in with a discharge. You take the sample and you basically use laboratory confirmation. If the person needs the drugs, you would treat them, but then you would also educate. And this is key to the whole process. Is you need to educate them and counsel them about what to do for proper prevention of getting the disease back. But also HIV counseling and testing is probably a big key. If they were getting the disease, an STI, from unsafe sexual practices, they're at higher risk for HIV as well. So you need to make sure that you actually educate them on that. Partner management, are they having multiple partners? Are they telling their partners that they have these diseases? Telling them that it's their responsibility to disclose it is extremely important. If the pattern doesn't change, then that's the major problem. And that's basically all I wanted to talk about for this lecture. I know it was extremely short, but I do want you to think, especially as you're working into your individual disease programs, think about what are the issues that are presented. Behavior change is one of the most difficult things that you can do in the public health world. A lot of programs do try to do behavior change, saying, trying to educate about condom use. Well, that's great, but the reality is that after 20 years of educating people, condom use is still fairly low. As we talked about with malaria bed net use is still lower than we'd like. And many of these diseases, behavior change, if it works, it's the most long-term progress that you can get. However, getting it to start to work, it takes a long time. So is the time investment for a behavior change program worth the cost and for the benefit? And thinking about that cost benefit is what's really key to understanding the what you want to do with your individual program. I hope that helps a little bit in understanding this. And also wanted to thank Nana Teta. She did a great presentation on HPV. I will post this one on Blackboard as well. But if you wanted to look more into detail about a particular type of disease, I think this is just a great example. I don't want to go into every single STI that's out there, because that could basically take up forever. And I just want you to understand the basic point of what it is and how they actually, what their problems are. Again, with STIs, as with HIV, you've got social economic problems that kind of envelope everything that you're dealing with disease, on top of the fact that there's treatments, whether there's vaccines available or not, as there is one with HPV, and there's several with the herpes viruses and hepatitis viruses. Sorry, there is none with the herpes virus, but there is with hepatitis virus. You can get vaccines for it, but there's also the social problems with getting the vaccine. Are people concerned that if they give the vaccine, that their children will be more sexually active? So I want you to think about all those different things. It's a mishmash of thought processes, but it's definitely key to understanding a lot of the issues that go on in the public health world. And with that, I know it was a short lecture. I'm going to post a couple of questions online. I'm hoping that these questions on our discussion board will stimulate some interesting responses. And if you're interested in any other disease that I didn't mention, please talk about it on the Blackboard. Bring it up and bring up why it's important as an STI, and let's see what we can talk about. Again, thank you very much, and have a good week.